that, but yep.
You ready to go?
You're like, no.
Ready, sir.
We're ready. Okay. All right. So it is just after 1 o'clock on October 1st, 2020. This is Ty Menser, acting chair today, vice chair of the Board of County Commissioners. Superior Court update is on tap. We've got Commissioner Edwards by phone, and then he'll be present shortly in the boardroom. We have Ramiro Chavez, county manager, in the boardroom. Presiding Judge Eric Price, and we've got Pamela Hartman-Beyer, court administrator, and that's the roundup. This is our monthly check-in, so there's no set agenda. We just basically can bring topics of mutual interest, and got a lot of stuff going on, so I'm sure that there's things to address. Good afternoon, I guess, Judge, and I'll pass it to you if you have an opening issue you wanted to address.
No, and good afternoon to the board and the two commissioners that are present. I don't have anything necessarily to talk about. I know Pam probably has some updates about the offsite space that's getting a lot of attention these days, and she's been working very, very hard on that. So she'll have to speak to those. Well, she can speak to those issues because she knows the details far better than I do. The one thing I would report on is last time I think we had our full commission update. We had been talking about jury trials and restarting jury trials. I know I've talked to some of you individually about our experience with restarting jury trials, but I think it hasn't been since we've had well, our prior full meeting. I'm not sure that had happened. The news is good. We had a trial, our first trial following the March shutdown, began on the 14th of September, and that went to verdict. Judge Murphy was the judicial officer, and an awful lot of work had occurred prior to that point with our jury administrator, with the parties, with public health that had vetted sort of the way we had arranged the courtroom for the jury trial. Jury selection, of course, was a little bit, well, quite a bit different from the way it was pre-COVID, where we did jury selection in phases with smaller groups of folks. I think 20 groups of 20 came in, as opposed to yesteryear where we did, up to 80 people together in a group. The actual trial occurred with the layout was very, very different from a normal trial. Rather than to have 12, 13 people in the jury box, we only had, I think, 4, maybe 5 people in the jury box, and then the rest of the jurors were spread within the well of the courtroom. It was a very different look. There's a couple of challenges to that. Not only is the appearance odd, but they had to work through a number of issues in terms of getting everybody a good view of what there is to see in terms of exhibits, in terms of witnesses, in terms of the lawyers themselves. And the lawyers obviously had a little bit of a compromised viewpoint of all the jurors. There's some rightfully have issues with that, but I think all in all, the bottom line is it went well. We got good feedback from the jurors in terms of their perception of the safety and in terms of the way the trial commenced. We still have issues to work through. There's still how do you get exhibits out in front of everybody in a way that's clear for everyone to see. Those are still challenges, but I think our first trial was a success. There was another trial set and started on the 21st of September. It completed jury selection, and they were beginning testimony on, I think, the 3rd day of trial, and it ended, unfortunately, in a mistrial for reasons completely unrelated to COVID. As I understand it, the reasons were would have occurred regardless of whether it was COVID or not. And then this week we didn't have a trial, so we have a number of trials set for next week, and we're looking forward to a successful. Well, it would be soup to nuts, our second full trial next week. So that's the update there. I'm happy to answer any questions about how that went, but we're encouraged, and I think we're especially encouraged based upon the feedback we received from the jurors that participated in it.
Just make a note, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell has joined us. Commissioner Edwards, any questions about the first trial issue?
No, I think that sounds like everything went as close to normal as it could possibly be, I guess.
I have a question. Are you getting response from, like, when you're summoning in jurors, are you getting people that are calling in and not wanting to be there, scared of getting the coronavirus, saying they're in an at-risk category, all that? Like, how is it getting people into the pool for the ordeal?
Yeah, we've changed the the perspective of people asking for a reassignment, and have a more liberal perspective on that. Pam, do you know the details on have you talked to Liz, our jury administrator, with respect to her experience on this? I know that we were pleased, and perhaps, I don't want to use the word surprised because that would be speaking for people, but I think once we had the folks in the jury assembly situation, we were surprised that there was very few people that indicated their discomfort with the situation. But with respect to your specific question of that initial reaction on the summons, Pam, do you have information on that?
Yeah, I don't have the exact number, Commissioner, but I can double check. The last time I did check in with Liz, I believe she was kind of surprised by the lack of people, not the lack, but the percentages of people asking to be rescheduled. She thought it would be higher based on either daycare or high risk category. And it wasn't as high as we anticipated. So what I can do is I can see maybe what our rescheduling needs was prior to COVID and then after, and see if I can get you that difference. I think she's been surprised by how little of that percentage is based on before and after, but I can get you what that difference is.
Yeah, I'm not asking for you to do a research project. That gives me a sense of it. I was just curious if you were losing half your pool, people were resistant to being summoned, and it sounds like maybe a little less than what you thought, which is good.
I think that is exactly what I've heard. It's maybe even far less than what we expected. I know that what the information we're projecting out when we summons people in for juries has been very encouraging to them to say, look, if you're in a high risk category, or you've been ill, or you have any symptoms, please don't come in. Not only don't come in, we'll reschedule right now. So, but once you take those people off, I think what we've been very surprised by is those folks who are not in those categories saying we don't want to come. There hasn't been as much of that as we suspected, and of course that's critical to getting a good balanced jury. One of the concerns that we of course have in this time period is what is the composition of the jury, and are you losing out on people who otherwise would report because of what that may or may not say about the fairness of the trial. And so we've been watching that, at least anecdotally, watching that pretty carefully, and we've been very pleased so far. I mean, obviously the news changes every day and people's attitudes can change. We may have been lucky with our first 3 or 4 pools, but we haven't seen that reaction that we've been fearing.
Hell, I haven't called in 2 years.
And, sorry.
Yeah, Romero, go ahead.
Sorry. Just out of curiosity, have you had any from the jurors, any resistance in wearing masks while conducting the trial? Obviously, they need to wear the mask for longer than most. Any feedback on that, or?
I do know that there was. I think Judge Murphy had mentioned to me, again in passing, so she would have a better firsthand impression of how that jury selection went. I know that once the jury was selected, we were all very, very happy with the way that they reacted to the situation and some of the difficulties. We ended up, for example, I've mentioned this before with respect to our challenges with trials, we can't during breaks, we can't hold them like we used to be able to in a small jury room. We've had to separate them out, which actually causes a lot more logistics, even in just movement during a break, because they have to be separated into 2 or 3 groups. Some go upstairs, some days stay downstairs, and there's a lot more cumbersome movement that occurs. And folks had a real good attitude about it. And I think once the jury was selected, there was very positive feedback on how that went. I do recall there was maybe one, and I think Judge Murphy was surprised at the lack of sort of opposition to the masking and to the situation. I think there was maybe one that she talked about, and that person didn't last very long in the jury pool. Pam, am I misremembering that? Because there was 2 jury pools that she's selected, and I think I only know of one that she sort of remarked at perhaps some resistance.
I know of one that didn't have any issues in terms of wearing a mask, but did relate to some issues in terms of having some allergic reactions to different like sanitizers and substances, but didn't disclose that until kind of the end. So that was kind of an issue, but they did not end up on our panel and didn't disclose that to the judge till the end. So, but everyone has been met. And had they kind of disclosed that earlier in the process, we would have rescheduled them to later, and we could have kept rescheduling them. So we're really willing to work with people to make this a really easy process. We want people to feel safe coming to serve.
And by the way, Pam is aware that her sound is terrible, and she's been working very hard over a period of weeks and weeks and weeks to get that figured out. I've been her worst critic on her sound, so I appreciate everyone's patience on that. But that's right. Some of the dynamics of the trial itself requires a lot of hand sanitizing, because they hand documents to jurors and they have to sort of hand sanitize relatively frequently. And Pam's right. There was a juror that said, by the way, I'm allergic to hand sanitizer, and it came up extremely late in the process, which, again, trial selection, the jury selection process, I should say, is slowed down quite a bit. I mean, it's adding at least half a day to a trial because of what we have to do. And I think a half a day is kind of a best case scenario in terms of the additional time required for jury selection. It's possible that when everything doesn't work quite right, and how many times does that happen? But it's going to be more than just even a half a day addition to the process.
I was going to mention that I remember it's probably 15 years ago now, but a training I was at on voir dire and techniques and stuff and questionnaires and what, this is a public defender thing, I think, it's defense perspective of, but anyway, there was a example, and I believe it was Connecticut, where they individually interviewed each juror. And I don't know if that's only in a big case or if that was in all felonies. I don't know exactly, but they were talking about that and the quality of information that they could get. And I know it's not ideal. Most court systems don't have the capacity probably to accommodate that. But in our situation, I don't know if something like that would, even though it would slow, if it would get us 2 trials at the same time, where now we can't, then I don't know, it's something to think about. But it sounds like there's even after the jury's selected, it sounds like you've got challenges with our space, just moving people around and doing the ordinary course of a trial. I don't know if we have a courtroom that's medium size that could do, a second trial with I don't know. I just throwing that out there because I remember that, and I've never worked in a court system. I worked in Alaska mostly, and then Washington does things pretty much the same way as Alaska did, with group voir dire. Lawyers get to question, but in a group setting, there's a pre-questionnaire. But I guess what I'm saying is there's all different systems, and there's ways to tweak that in an emergency situation, in order to get another trial going, it might be worth doing something you wouldn't want to do under normal circumstances, if it meant, you could actually do more than one trial.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked really hard.
All questionnaires, for example, like some jurisdictions don't allow attorney questioning. You get the questionnaire, you get to add questions to the questionnaire, so you have a longer, tailored questionnaire, and then the lawyers get those questionnaires back, and then they make their choices. That's one extreme. The other extreme is you go one by one and do individual between the judge and the two lawyers, juror by juror. And that's kind of the other extreme. We're kind of in the middle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've just addressing the issue of a second trial. That's obviously been, it's a huge concern of ours, only doing one trial at a time. And we've spent a lot of time with the ruler in a 6-foot distance, trying to figure out if there's a possible way to use one of our other courtrooms, whether a medium one or a small one, while at the same time using 102, our big one, which is currently the way we do it. And the math just doesn't work. And in part, it's the math in the courtroom, but it's also the math in terms of having two juries at the same time for the same reasons I just mentioned. We have to separate them out, and we just lose the capacity to entertain two different juries at the same time. So
lunch breaks and stuff like that, right, would be at the same time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, maybe we should move then. That's a good segue to the offsite space and what the concerns are there or what the status is. I went over and looked at it since we've last talked and walked around and got a sense of it. So that was useful to me. I'll tell you my superficial impression was it was more, so it was a lot more tailored, like construction going on. So it was more going on at the beginning that's going to take longer, but then ultimately it's going to be better. It's kind of was my thought. I mean, back when this started, we were talking about just renting staples, right, and just putting up like temporary walls. And so I was imagining a huge space with little frills, just to get things going. And what I saw was a much more tailored space with a lot of thought going and renovation going into it, which is not getting us going as fast as we'd like to. But, once it does get going, it may work for our needs a heck of a lot better than what I had initially thought. That was my kind of takeaway after walking through it.
I think that's a really accurate way of portraying what it'll ultimately be. And I think a lot of those sort of the difference between, and I'd even talk about a Cirque du Soleil tent. I know that Robin and Romero were on a call in which I said, hey, I don't care, let's have a big tent. But when we, like all first ideas, and they're not all good ideas. I think that the needs of security, the needs of not only keeping the public safe but keeping the defendants secure, because using the space for in custody, it requires all those frills. Requires those things. I mean, I think actually using the word frills is probably inaccurate because it makes it seem like any sort of excess is being done. But I know that there's been a whole lot of really hard thinking on what's the minimum. The minimum means certain things that are involved because of the type of thing that the operations that we're doing and the type of population that we're serving. But I've been really pleased with all the effort that's gone into it. Pam, let me just say, I know she's here, so this may seem like pandering, but Pam already has 2 full-time jobs. And then to put this on top of it has just been unfair. But we've been benefiting from her active participation in it. She's in my office frequently saying, okay, these 15 things happened today on that project alone, and how she's trying to resolve them and deal with stakeholders and so forth. And I know a lot of the other folks on here on this call have been involved as well, Robin and Romero, and been helping immensely in dealing with the different aspects of county government that's involved in this. But it's just been a whole lot of work. So Pam's got a lot of the details on where we currently sit with that. The best source is Pam, so she has a bit of an update, I think.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any specific questions, commissioners. I'm happy to answer them though. We're kind of running fast and furious, and as Judge Price said, my sound is awful, so I'll try to keep it brief. But I just got a layout of kind of the furniture placement, which is going to help IT do drops in different lines for networking. And so I'm going to share that with the stakeholders today and hopefully get final approval. And so we're moving really fast. It's difficult to keep up with at times, but I'm happy to touch base with any of you because I know my sound is awful. So apologies. If you have questions, I can answer them.
Commissioner Edwards, anything on this site space for Pam?
I guess the only thing I would add to this is I feel pretty comfortable whatever is being done is probably being done right without my limited interjection into this situation, or Pam would have been in there saying there's 20 things that happened today or something. So no, I think between Commissioner Menser and the whole judicial arena, I think there's some expertise there that can take care of that. I didn't go over and try to take a tour and tell you how to do it. I feel very comfortable that it's going to be done right.
Ramiro or Robin, anything you'd like to ask about this? You guys are probably tracking it closer than we are.
Yeah, we're tracking from the point of view of project delivery. Maybe Robin can provide a little bit of an update in terms of the project delivery and the dates. I believe the goal is to have this ready by the end of this month. And I think we are still tracking to have those improvements done by then, but Robin can follow up on that.
So the goal is to have the project complete and ready to move in on October 30. I've got a meeting later today with Chris Helmer, the project manager, and I saw something go through about a possible delay due to, is it the wiring? There's something in there that could throw a wrench in the plan, but I know Chris is doing everything he can to keep this project on track.
So the latest information I have is that because of construction schedules and just different things, just because of COVID in general, we're probably more like mid-November at this point. We have every other week walkthroughs of the space just to make sure things are going well. Our last walkthrough was actually scheduled for yesterday, and we weren't able to do the walkthrough just because of the construction site. We don't want to delay construction occurring, so we're not going to stop construction to go do a walkthrough. It's my understanding that the only delay doesn't actually affect Superior Court. It may affect the district court space in terms of their audio recording needs. When we do trials in Superior Court, we use a court reporter. So we have amplification needs and sound needs, but not recording needs. And there's a timeline issue with IT and securing the JAVS software and cabling needs. I think that is the delay for district court, but it's not a Superior Court issue. So I think you're gonna have to check in with Chris on that piece, Robin.
Right, that's the plan. But he's really done everything he can to keep this project on track so the courts can get in there and start having that second jury trial.
I have to say that when I saw what and had described what was needed to be done, and then I heard the timeline, it was hard to believe that it could even be planned to be done that fast. And so I'm not surprised there's a little bit of delay, but even if you got it going by mid-November, that would be pretty impressive given what's going on over there.
Right.
Yeah, even when we established the end of October, we were working on the old timeline to use the CARES money. Now that has been moved to the end of November, so it gives us that flexibility.
Yeah, we didn't have
Right. It does create a bit of space. It is an audacious goal, but we're doing everything we can to meet it.
One quickie on my list was when we had our one-on-one or our one-on-two there that we do monthly, we talked about the ITA and the new facility in Hawks Prairie. So BHO wise, they're not really involved and they're not really working with a contact. So so that was one avenue I wanted to find if I could find. You asked me for a contact, but separately, Ramiro and I had a meeting with the new CEO of Providence, and they're directly involved because they're like a partner in this project, and they promised to get me a a contact. So I think that I'm cautiously optimistic I will be able to get you the person you need, but it'll be through Providence, not through the BHA-ASO. So that's just a quick update on that. And as soon as I get a word on that, I'll follow up on that, maybe, early next week or something. And then we had the issue of the South Sound that was going to bump up beds by 27 or so. At the BHO meeting, that was brought up. Joe had heard about that, and there was going to be some meeting forthcoming. I don't know if you're involved in it in terms of trying to figure out what those needs are going to look like. So maybe you've got an update on that. I don't really know any more than that.
Yeah, so I think you heard about the space next to the triage center as well. It's more for long-term beds is our understanding. So it's going to look a little bit different than the 90-day beds. And so we're trying to estimate the need, but and the time. We see it a little bit differently than what's currently going on with the more short-term beds. And so we don't anticipate the same level of need or delivery. And so we're trying to still wrap our heads around what this 27 bed with longer term stays is going to mean. But what they also said is they were looking at opening 2 additional units sometime next year and 2 additional floors. And that potentially meant not being in our same courtroom space and trying to find us new courtroom space. And it's not practical long-term for us to continue to do ITA hearings in a conference room, which is where we're currently doing them. And so we need to figure all of those pieces out and how we're going to add additional judicial time and additional stakeholder time to all of that. So I do have a contact now at South Sound Behavioral Health. They've been through a number of CEOs. And so we're meeting on that on October 8th. It's with all of the court stakeholders. If you would like me to forward that meeting to one of the commissioners or to Robin, please let me know. I'm happy to do that. I believe it's 8. It might be the 6th. But I'm happy to do that. Please let me know.
Yeah, because recall each one of these hearings has a prosecutor, has a defense lawyer, and has a clerk. So there are 3 different offices that are also impacted, not just judicial time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, the 6th, I don't think the 6th or the 8th works for the commissioners because the 6th is a Tuesday and the 8th is a budget all day presentation. So chances are we would not be able to attend, but yeah, keep us informed if there's developments. Any questions from anyone, Commissioner Edwards, or on this ITA court issue?
No, sir.
Okay. What else you got for me, guys? I didn't have anything else on my list. I thought that was pretty cool to see Jim Powers' retirement event yesterday. Yeah, 38 years of pretty amazing service to Thurston County. Always one of my favorite prosecutors to work with as a defense attorney. So we'll miss him.
Yeah, I would just echo that. I was there. I didn't speak because I was anticipating. Well, I thought it was sort of a more in-house kind of celebration. However, I would certainly echo from my perspective that Jim Powers was a very special prosecutor because of not only you could count on him, and you heard how many hours he worked, how his truck was here every weekend and every night. And that's true. I would leave here late and he'd be walking out and I'd see him walking out 9 at night. So you knew you could count on his legal analysis, which as a judge is critical. But more than that, you could count on him that he would have thought through, even though he's a prosecutor, you could count on him having thought through what's the right thing to do. And that is huge. As a judge, speaking as a judge, you're obviously trying to understand which is the right legal position or the right legal answer, but often there's 2 legitimate legal answers. But what you should do as a judge, you're by yourself often, right? You got two sides arguing both sides with legally justified position. Yeah, you're alone. You're lonely. I mean, I'll use that phrase as a judge. But when you had Jim Powers on a case, you knew that he, of course, through the lens of a prosecutor, but he had thought through that. So when he took a position, it was, it meant so much more to us judges than many, many others. And I'm always struck with how, maybe lawyers don't think the long game like Jim Powers did. His reputation among the judges was the gold standard, and what that meant for him in advocating for his position was, I can't imagine anybody else being as persuasive as he was for that reason, because you could not only count on him being legally accurate, but because you could count on his conscience. So, it's a huge loss. And I guess I don't mind publicly saying, because I didn't say it last night, Jim Powers was a one of a kind.
I have to agree. I always just, lawyers tend to be competitive and all that. And there's a layer of bravado or, some kind of posturing that goes on sometimes amongst counsel. It's very typical. But with Jim, it's just none of that. It was just, he was going to be tenacious, and he was going to be, he was going to insist on accountability and justice. But there was no gamesmanship. It was all just like, let's sit down and talk about what the right outcome, could be here, with no sense of, he has to win or he has to, it wasn't about, it had nothing to do with him. No ego. Just trying to, like you said, just trying to get to the right result. So, yeah. Anyway,
Ty?
Yeah.
I guess I'll just take a second, because I didn't get to go to Jim's deal, but you folks got to know him somewhat. I knew him for his whole career from the day he started, and he was always a gentleman. Let me just say that, to keep everything smooth and nobody got riled, and he always thought it out. So I'll just let it go at that. You're right, he's a good man.
Speaking of retirement, actually, I have one more thing, because I'm not sure if folks have heard this, but speaking of retirements, our juvenile court administrator, Mike Fenton, has announced his retirement. Yeah, okay, I can see by reactions folks didn't know. So we are mourning that loss in the court. Obviously, well deserved.
When is his last day?
Well, when his last day versus when he's not in the office anymore.
I'm sure he's taking when his last day in his position.
Right.
I believe it's November 1.
Okay, it's coming up. Jeez.
Yeah.
How many years did Mike have in?
I believe it's like 30 plus.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that. I should know that, but I will know that by the time the celebration comes around, and I know that something is being planned. Right.
So we've been working with Pam's been working with HR to talk about an interim plan, because there's quite a bit of a gulf between his last day in the office and his last day on the payroll. So and to talk about recruiting plans for next soon. So anyway, that folks should know.
Wow, nice.
Any other topics for today's meeting? I don't have anything.
We get the gift of time today from you, Ty.
You certainly can, as long as that's okay with Judge Price and Pam.
Yeah, as always, I've said this to each of you individually, and I'll say it to you collectively. If anything comes up and you need to talk to me, I can figure out how to make that happen. I'm at your disposal in terms of answering questions if I can.
Okay, well, we sure appreciate that, and we'll adjourn this meeting and see you guys very, very soon.
All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.